Thanks for downloading this episode of Cork Talk with me, Tim Atkin. A weekly conversation with some of the most famous people in the world of wine.
This podcast is brought to you in partnership with Noma Cork by Vinventions. Driven by a commitment to innovation, the new plant-based Noma Cork Green Line offers significant improvements in wine closure performance. Thanks to a rigorous oxygen ingress rate, you can decide which cork is best for your wine, whether it's for young and fresh wines or for those with aging potential.
Santiago Achával wanted to be a classical guitarist until he realised he'd never be another Julian Bream. Instead, he studied accountancy and finance before going on to found one of Mendoza's most successful wineries, Achával Ferrer. Listen to us chat about Malbec, extreme sights, his friendship with the Italian winemaker Roberto Cipresso, and what he's achieved at Matervini after the sale of Achával Ferrer. Hi, Santiago. How are you?
Good afternoon, Tim. Doing fine in the middle of vacations in the mountains in Cordoba, far away from the vineyards. And I had to come to a truck stop to get a Wi-Fi hotspot. There's no connectivity in the mountains in Cordoba. So
there might be a bit of noise, Mother, or
there's
not?
There's going to be a little bit of noise. I apologize for that. This is the best I could do on a Sunday in the middle of the vacations.
Okay, well,
it's a pleasure to be able to talk to you. So it's worth the travel.
It's lovely to see you and to talk to you. Anyway, listen, lots to talk about. Matervini, Achával Ferrer, your background, which is fascinating. Let's start with, everyone can hear that you speak excellent English, and you were actually born in the States, weren't you, in Minnesota, in Rochester?
Yes.
Are there any vines there?
I think not. There may be some Concord or Norton, the very rustic early winemaking varieties that the pioneers used that couldn't grow fungal resistance into the European vineyards.
And what's the place best known for? They're not known for its wines, is it? Let's face it.
It is known for the Mayo Clinic. Actually, Dad is a medical doctor. He was working at the Mayo Clinic, and I was born there. And going to your remark on the English, they did not teach me any Spanish until we came to Argentina. So they kept Spanish as a private language, and they only taught us English.
And they were Argentinians, and
yes.
They took you back to Cordoba, where you are on holiday, as a 6-year-old, is that right?
6 years old. And I arrived there. You know how nowadays when your kid goes to the first day of class, there's this adaptation period and mom stays with the kid a few hours. I was 6 years old. They dropped me off the curb of a public school and say, see you at noon. And I had not a word of Spanish. So I had to deal with it on my own.
Were they wine drinkers? I mean, the medical profession, doctors are famously keen on wine. Did they introduce you to wine at a young age? Have this vision of you kind of drinking wine as an 8-year-old or something?
No. Dad is a wine drinker. I saw him have wine at every meal during the week and on weekends. But he had this, his medical upbringing was, Mayo Clinic, American Midwest, very still this puritanical thing there about alcohol. And he decided that I would only drink when I turned 18, which is legal in Argentina. And so when I turned 18, I said, okay, Dad, pass the wine, please. And he said, you haven't read the fine print. The fine print says that you can buy your own wine. So I actually did not gain a wine education with my dad. I had to wait for that.
But it's interesting that you're perfectly bilingual. I mean, you're one of the most bilingual people I know in Argentina. I mean, do you feel American deep down, or Spanish, or rather Argentine? I mean, or a bit of both? Which language do you dream in, English or Spanish?
I feel a bit of both, and it takes me only, say, when I travel to the U.S., it takes me only a couple of days to begin dreaming in English, or, which is maybe more revealing, if I bang my toe against the bed, I will curse in English.
But what about when you're in Argentina? Do you curse in Argentina in Spanish?
Yeah, I go revert to cursing in Spanish.
Okay. And I mean, how does that affect your personality, do you think, having these two halves to it, really?
I think it opens your brain up to accept a lot of realities for what they are, maybe not judge them, and maybe just see as objectively as possible. And know that there's different things around than the ones you grew up with. I think that's the main take on this multicultural, multinationality thing that I have.
I mean, they're such different places, aren't they, America and Argentina?
Yes.
I mean, what do you like most about the two of them?
Well, Argentina is the sense of community, friendship, family, which I think is more tightly knit than in the U.S. In the U.S., I'm fascinated about the possibilities of doing things, of accomplishing things, of being an entrepreneur and counting on the background to respond to you. And having
the economy is a bit stronger as well, isn't it?
Well, and having a supplier that says, I will deliver such day, and not having to call him a week before and 2 days before, just in case he does not deliver.
Yeah, exactly. We can hear some children screaming in the background. I hope they're not your grandchildren.
Not mine. No, I have 5 of those. And that's one of the reasons I came to the hotspot, because they're all
escape them.
Yeah, they're all over the house.
Yeah. Listen, you qualified in accountancy and finance at Cordoba University, where you are now, and they're kind of underrated skills in the wine industry, I think, sometimes. But you've got no formal training in enology. You've never done that. I mean, has that been a help or a hindrance? I mean, I know you're a great reader and you're a thinker and you're a very intelligent human being, and you watch, don't you?
I was lucky to have a great friend and mentor and teacher in Roberto Cipresso, who is an Italian winemaker. He works in Tuscany and consults throughout Italy. So I'd say I attended a private university. I like your question in the sense is it help? And I think it was a bit of a help to start doing this when I was in my 30s. And I think sometimes in winemaking schools, they grab a kid who's 16, 17 years old, straight out of high school, and they may imprint a lot of this is how it's done. And I approached it with a more adult, say, mindset and the ability to question, okay, it is done this way, but is this necessarily what our grapes need? Is this necessarily what the compatible with our winemaking goal? And we didn't question as a rebellious streak or just looking for originality for its own sake. I was questioning it, trying to find a better path. And we started doing things differently than the winemaking books say. I don't know.
And it helped having Roberto there, who is a trained enologist. So he's a safety net in a way, yeah?
Yes, he was the safety net. And he was the guy who said, listen, stop. This may be not the thing we need right now. I remember back in 2003, we had a big heat wave at the end of February. So it is the same heat wave Bordeaux had in August 2003. Yeah. And we started getting grapes with a 16% potential alcohol. And Roberto was pulling his hair out and said, the only solution is to add water, but we just raised these concentrated, complex, balanced grapes. So it'd be a crime to add water. Actually, in Argentina, it is a crime to add water. Literally. And he said, well, why don't we try evaporating a bit of the alcohol? And he bought a couple of fans and started hanging the fans over the open pump over sumps. And we slowly observed that it actually was evaporating alcohol. So we avoided adding the water. And then we started refining the process. But that was Roberto's discovery or intuition. Say, he's very creative, and it leads to insights that otherwise we wouldn't have had.
I mean, we'll talk about him a bit more because you worked with him at Achával Ferrer and then also now at Matervini. I just wonder, why do you two guys work together so well? Because he's Italian, you're American, Argentinian. What is it about the two of you that works, you think?
It's a strange friendship and partnership. We've been partners and friends now for 25 years. And we never had stood toe to toe and nose to nose in a fight. It didn't happen. So I don't know. It may help, those marriages that are at a distance. People are not together so much. He's in Italy, I'm in Argentina. He acknowledges my leadership in a lot of things. I acknowledge his leadership in the winemaking area. We complement each other, but he's a brainstormer. I'm a idea filter.
So it's the business brain and the wine brain, but you've got a wine brain as well.
Yes, but what I do is I recognize good ideas, and I'm kind of able to separate the wheat from the chaff in that sense.
Yeah. Because you went to Stanford to do your MBA, didn't you?
Yeah.
And you started to visit the Napa Valley, I think, as a tourist, really, in 1988.
Exactly, as a tourist. Yeah. We went drinking, not even wine tasting. We went drinking.
What do you remember of that time? Were there wineries that inspired you? Mondavi, for example?
I don't remember wineries that inspired me very much. I think this was the whole ecosystem, the vineyards. This was back in 87, 88. It was a time you could walk into the barrel room. You could talk to the cellar rats. You could walk into the vineyards. It was not as regimented as it is now. And I think the whole ecosystem started fascinating me. And the connection of wine with history, with sociology, with a human survival, all this started appealing tremendously to me. And at the same time, I had teachers that were encouraging us to drop whatever career we had and find our passion and do something new. And that was also strange to me. I came from I'd say conservative background in Cordoba. Normally, if you got a degree in law, you would retire as a lawyer. So this encouragement to do something new, I said, okay, so you can change. Okay, when I'm grown up, I was 27. When I grow up, I want to be a winemaker. And I formed the purpose there.
So those visits to the Napa Valley made you think, hey, I want to do wine?
Yes, exactly. The visits and the walks in the vineyards and the friends I made over there that also shared this passion for wine. And I said, okay, I'm going to do this. And I turned it into a purpose. And then, of course, I kicked it as far ahead as I could responsibly because I had to go back, work for the company that had financed the MBA. So I knew it was some years down the road. But 10 years after getting my degree, I was already a founding partner of Achával Ferrer.
So that was what, 1998, wasn't it? And
yes.
you talked about Roberto Cipresso, who was involved, and the Ferrer bit of the Achával Ferrer was Manuel Ferrer.
Yes.
I just wonder, how did the project start? How did you find these guys, or how did they find you? And how did you select the vineyards you wanted to work with?
Well, Manuel was worked with me at the same company. And we were the two young guys in the middle of teams of middle-aged managers. So we bonded, and we had to travel together to a couple of the places regularly. And I was obsessed with wine. And you know what a guy who's obsessed does? He talks about his passion. And Manuel started hearing this and said, Santiago, if you invest in wine, I'd like to invest with you. And I said, okay, let's do it. And he said, by the way, now that you've accepted my investment, my partnership, he said, I know a cool Italian winemaker.
He knew him. He knew Roberto.
He knew Roberto, yes. He knew Roberto through another guy who's an Italian co-pilot of a rally team. You know, the dirt road car racing rally championship. Manuel knew the co-pilot of a very good winning team that was twice world champion and that kind of thing. With
and how did you select the vineyards? I mean, it was presumably easier in those days to find good grapes because there wasn't everybody trying to buy them, right?
There wasn't everybody trying to buy them. We were lucky. We arrived in a vacuum. Catena was not out there yet, the brand. They worked through Saint Felicien as their premium brand. There was no small size winery, maybe Finca La Anita, but nobody else was out there doing high quality, low volumes. And we started buying a piece of land in Tupungato. And then we started driving around looking for more land. And we found a very old, unkempt, messy, full of weeds vineyard in Altamira. And we called it Finca Altamira. And we harvested those grapes 3 days after buying the vineyard for the price of the raw land.
So you bought all these vineyards, did you?
We bought the old vineyards, like Finca Altamira, Finca Bella Vista, and we found out that these vineyards had the potential to make wines of character. Same variety, same winemaking, but distinctively different character. Altamira from Bella Vista.
And was it always Malbec or other varieties too?
It was always Malbec. Very early on, we recognized that Malbec has in terms of both the adaptability to different areas and the responsiveness to the local characteristics, Malbec creates a more terroir-driven wine than other varieties. Cabernet Franc does it too. Ala Vigil is doing his Enemigos, the Grand Enemies,
amazing
on Cabernet Franc. But I think Malbec has more adaptability and responsiveness to terroir than Cabernet Franc does.
Yeah, I mean, who determined the styles of wine that you made? Was it the place? Was it you guys sitting down saying we want to make this style? Were you influenced by Napa or by the French, or what influenced?
No, I think back then I was merely a listener to what Roberto was saying. You know what?
The Italians, I suppose.
But the first thing he said, Santiago, I will not bring Tuscany into Mendoza. I'm here to listen to the land, to listen to the old guys, the guys with wrinkles and brown skin and dirt under the nails. I will listen, and then we will think what we do. I would say if I could, I can identify one episode that I think was pivotal in defining our style, which is Finca Altamira was abandoned almost viticulturally, and this made the yields tiny yields. It was yielding less than a ton per acre, less than 15 hectoliters a hectare. Roughly 15 hectoliters a hectare. So very minuscule yields, and we loved the wine when we made it. And he said, and then the question came up: what if we managed the other Malbec vineyards that we started finding to those same yields, lower yields, a lower metabolic rate? I wouldn't call it the bonsai of wine growing, but it is something. It's something like that. It's a lower metabolic rate, a lower production, a balance at a lower equilibrium that gives you this complexity and textural differences that I think we have.
I mean, you've talked about Malbec reflecting its terroir, and they're very different expressions of the grape. Well, what is it that you like most about Malbec? I mean, apart from that, obviously, but what makes it easy to work with? What makes it so successful in Argentina?
I think that it grows great wine from Patagonia to Jujuy, from 300 meters above sea level to 3,800 meters above sea level. In any area that I've worked in, where it ripens Malbec is the best wine in that area. I've made Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Merlot, Petit Verdot. I've worked with Grenache and Mourvedre, and in all those vineyards, I've tried to make a super duper ultra non plus ultra wine. But in all those vineyards, I end up the best wine we end up making is a Malbec. So it's at some point you have to realize nature's telling you something.
It's found its place, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
I mean, Achával Ferrer was successful very quickly. Extremely successful. I mean, were you surprised? Did you think, "Wow, how did we get that so right?"
I was surprised. Roberto would tell us, "Listen, there are people that work at generations in Europe and don't get the level of success that we have." Part of that was that we started with a blank sheet. We had no vineyards. We had no father or grandfather to contradict. We had no influence of older practices and older generations. We could pick and choose. And we had a talented winemaker in that I would stay the course and do it until we got it right. Um, that helped. That helped too.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, you sold the winery, 2011, although you stayed on as consultant
Yes.
winemaker and CEO, I think, till 2013, and then winemaker 2015. Why did you sell? I mean, you'd built this incredible brand. Was it an offer you couldn't refuse, or did you just think it's time to do something else?
I was looking for a minority shareholder, minority partner, because Roberto had to sell his shares. Remember, this was 2010. We started looking for the investor. It was at the back end of the big crisis, 2008 and 9. Roberto had a series of missteps economically in Italy. He needed the money. And the first offer I got was for a majority, not for a minority portion of the winery. And so I thought about it. I took my wife to the beach on vacation and said, we have this. What are we going to do? And partially the decision was driven by the fact that everything I had in this world was invested in the winery. And I told my wife, listen, I would not sell. I would not recommend selling for my pleasure, but as a husband and as a father, I have to tell you that if I get an ACV, if I get hit by a train or my plane falls, this kind of money you will not get from Manuel because he doesn't have this kind of money. So I sold more as a family responsibility with pain and I only did it because I was staying on as a consultant. Actually, I wouldn't have done it.
But now you've gone, haven't you?
I left in 2015, 4 years after selling. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, you've been working on Matervini, as it were, from 2008, where you are now, again with Roberto Cipresso. And the idea was then to look at how Malbec expresses itself on non-alluvial soils. That's to say, not the soils that you find in the Primera Zona, primarily in Mendoza. So which soils were you looking for and where did you find them?
Well, we were looking for something that was similar or akin to Salta and Salta, the Molinos region, or the Yacochuya district. So very close to the mountain, to the hills, and soils that had rocks were broken and not rounded by erosion. Soils where the makeup of the subsoil was driven by only one or maybe two different kind of geologies, because we were fascinated by the ability of Salta to give character and personality to the wines. And this gave us, it raised the question is, why do these wines appeal so much, fascinate so much? Why do these vineyards have more ability than the Mendoza vineyards to impart character? And what our first answer, trying to find the answers between the luminosity of the quality of the sunlight, the height above sea level, of all those answers, the one that best fit the jigsaw puzzle was soils are different. And so then we said, okay, let's find where in Mendoza do we find these soils? And it was not in the valleys. It was not on the Primera Zona. It was not in Uco, because all those are alluvial cones of the rivers, of the glaciers. And we found it that we found these soils in the hillsides of the Precordillera, not the Andes, but the older, lower mountain range that is east of the Andes.
And we'll talk about some of those sites in a minute, particularly El Chayal, where I've been with you, which is just a crazy place. But before that, just tell me quickly, how is Matervini different from Achával Ferrer? Is Matervini Achával Ferrer too, in a sense?
I think it could be a way of describing it in a sense. The vision and the goal and our magnetic north, the pursuits are still the same in the sense that we're trying to describe sites through an interpreter that is Malbec. So that stays the same. We've only added another layer to say, hey, let's not only concentrate on old vines of the of the known viticultural areas. Let's see what happens with non-alluvial soils. And necessarily you have to plant in those places because nobody had planted before there. Or maybe
you have alluvial soils too, don't you?
we do, and I think it makes a lot of sense. You cannot ask a consumer. I could ask you to recognize alluvial from non-alluvial because you are a guy who has had a lot of Argentina wine. But I cannot ask a consumer to recognize that in a glass. But if I put two glasses in front of the consumer and say, here is Finca, for example, Finca is Pedriel, Pedriel is alluvial, traditional soils. And here is Piedras Viejas or Canota. And then the differences between those two glasses are very, very immediately comprehensible.
Yeah, yeah. And how many wines do you make now?
I think there's 8.
One white, 7 reds, yeah?
Yes, I think, no, we're going 1 white, 8 reds now.
8 reds,
we're
9.
making 9, yes. Yeah.
And your furthest north would be Salta, and your furthest south would be?
Furthest south is Uco Valley, Los Chacayes.
Is Altamira, or Chacayes or Altamira,
Los
yeah?
Chacayes. You were not working in Altamira. There's the same as I'm not working in Gualtellari. I think there's no value add to the winemaking world to have another wine from Gualtellari. Everybody is doing a thorough exploration of Gualtellari. I'm going this summer, and I don't think you've heard this, and nobody heard this before. So this is fresh news for you. This summer we're growing grapes in San Juan.
Fantastic!
From a place called La Ciénaga at 1,570 meters above sea level. It's a north-south valley that connects Pedernal in the south to Sonda in the north.
And there's one producer there already, isn't there?
Yes, we are working with him. It's his vineyard.
Yeah, fantastic.
So
that's a fantastic vineyard.
Yes, and we're taking his vineyard and managing the vineyard, that block of vineyard, to our wine grow and practices.
Your vision, fantastic. Tell us a little bit about El Cheliao. I mean, how did you discover that crazy place, and what were the challenges involved in planting it? I mean, man.
Well, the first thing you need to know is that when we were in Salta with Roberto said, I want to own a vineyard here. And he pointed downwards, and we were a bit close to Molinos. We were in Finca Humanao. The owners had just bought Finca Humanao, and he wanted a piece of land there. And you've been there, you know, it's a very long drive. Let's put it that way. It is impossible to manage high quality vineyard there and others in Mendoza, and the vineyard management seasons are in sync, so you have to be in one place or the other. I told Roberto, no, we can't do that. Let's find, as an answer to this, his urge, so let's find soils in Mendoza that can give us this kind of experience. And we started looking around Mendoza, and clearly it was not the Andes what would give us, because the Andes don't have soil yet. You have all these broken rock cones. It's called dejection cones in geology. And that would not give us a growing place for vines. It clearly was the Precordillera. The problem was everybody wanted to sell us 50,000 hectares in the Precordillera. I said, no, I'm looking for 10 hectares, not even 10,000, 10 hectares. So it took us 4 years to find the land. And we found this little piece of land that had, in a 20 hectare block, it had 4 distinctive soil types. And some of them were on steep hillsides. Some of them were on medium grade hillsides. Nobody had planted anything up there before. And I had a big, I wouldn't say fight, but I had an exchange of ideas with Manuel. And Manuel said,
the owner,
Manuel Ferrer, yeah. And Manuel said, I refuse. He says, this is going to be the sinkhole of financial goodies. All the money will go down the drain here. And Roberto and I would tell him, Manuel, this is the new viticultural frontier. And so,
so it's proved.
I said, I like to say good news and bad news. The bad news is the bad news is Manuel was right. It turned up to be a sinkhole of financial wherewithals. But the good news is Roberto and I were right too. It was the most.
They've made amazing wines.
It was the most expensive vineyard to plant and take to fruition. It took us 10 years to get a first sizable crop after planting, which is triple what it takes you in the valley floor. And the cost per hectare is, I stopped looking at the cost per hectare once it arrived at a number. I don't want to look at this anymore. There was nothing to be gained by looking at that number.
No, these are dear. Well, brilliant wine. But you also make wine in Paso Robles, in the States, in the States since 2009. It's this project's called the Farm Winery, isn't it?
Correct.
Which styles of wine do you make there? Are you making Malbec there?
No. Well, we make a tiny amount of Malbec because I like to see what Malbec does. But clearly, my Paso Robles, either the soil, the weather, or the clonal selection, the DNA that's available there, does not make the best wines in Paso Robles. We are making, with my friends Jim and Asmina Madsen, my partners up there. We're friends since business school. We're making 4 or 5 Cabernet Sauvignons and some Cabernet blends. We're making low alcohol Cabernet Sauvignons in Paso Robles, which is,
wow.
I'm talking 13.
How low? How low is low?
13 and a half.
That's low, yeah.
In a countryside that makes 16% Cabernets, I think that qualifies as low.
And you a bit of Garnacha as well, isn't there? You're making some Garnacha?
We are making blends of Grenache and Syrah, all the way from 100% Grenache, then Grenache with some Syrah, then half and half, and then Syrah with some Grenache, and a pure Syrah. So all the dégradé, the continuum between Syrah and Grenache. We're not making. We're not making Mourvedre because it ripens too late. I need to go back to my paint job.
So Paso is pretty cool in terms of the Pacific influence, isn't it?
And where we are, it is. As you know, Paso. The further west you go, the cooler it gets, as you said, because of the Pacific Ocean. And we're in the Adelaida district, which is the furthest west district on the north side of Paso. There's another area called York Mountain that is further west. That is cooler than ours, but it is really cool. You know how it's cool? The Grenache, we have a high elevation Grenache, 1,800 feet. The Grenache is pale in color. It has the color of a Pinot Noir. That tells you that's a cool wine growing area.
Yeah. I want to go back to Mendoza quickly, particularly to talk about the vines of Mendoza, which is another one of these great things you've been involved with, as well as Achával Ferrer and Matervini. Just tell us a little bit about the Vines of Mendoza project, because it's kind of where people can own little bits of the vineyard and make their own wines. Is that how it works?
That's how it works. These are a couple of American expats that I met in 2006, and they told me we have this crazy idea to sell private vineyards. And would you like to consult for us? This was after the barbecue and after 3 bottles of wine. So I said, listen, you seem like good guys. I like you, but I'd like to meet the land first. And because clearly you want my name as a validation of there's nothing there, and you want some kind of validation that this is going to work in terms of quality. I need to see the land. And I saw the land, and we rode horseback for hours, and they had dug backhoe pits 2 meters down, 2.5 meters down. And I walked into those pits, and I was fascinated. I had been making wine in Tupungato. This is a bit south of Tupungato, soils that were better structured than Tupungato is. And I told them there's no doubt that we can make fascinating wines here. And so
it's in Los Chacayes, yeah?
In Los Chacayes, which didn't exist as an appellation back then. And so we planted, and I stayed on as a consultant winemaker until now.
Are you still there? You're still there, aren't you?
Yes. There was a couple of years during the pandemic that I was not, my one contract had expired, and there was no renewal. We're all back home looking at a wall. But now they've renewed a contract, so I'm again doing stuff with them. I took my payment in vineyards, so I never left.
So you own vineyards there as well, part of it.
Substantial amount of vineyards. Throughout 14 years, I accrued
And how many vineyard owners are there, where they're making their own brands there?
There's like 300 and something vineyard owners. There's, again, 300 and something hectares, almost 400 hectares planted. This winery...
With every variety under the sun. I mean, it's got everything, isn't it?
Every variety. And the winery makes distinct fermentations, 400 and something distinct fermentations per year. I don't know any winery in the world that does that kind of thing. No winery.
Must be fascinating.
Not even the custom crush facilities in Napa. Those maybe make 50, 60 different wines. This is 400. I was so involved with the setting up of this that I turned up to make good friends with their winemaker, Pablo Martorell.
Nice guy.
And he's a good guy, and he's very talented. And we are now partnering on a new project with Pablo. It's going to be. We start building the winery there in the winemakers village in a month.
Fantastic.
We're breaking ground in a month.
I mean, you've got so much on your plate. You've got all these different projects. But if you had time, is there anywhere else in the world you'd like to make wine? Maybe Italy? Would you like to go and do something with Roberto over in Tuscany?
I'm a partner in Roberto's Italian winery.
Good. I thought you might be.
I have 10% of Roberto Cipresso wines, the brand.
Yeah.
And we've done some wines there, but I don't want to overextend myself, and I believe in the joy of walking the vineyards and tasting the barrels in the barrel room. I would not want to own a seat on an airplane. I don't want to be on an airplane all the time. I travel too much as it is. I think this is projects enough, and I like to concentrate on what I'm doing. And there's so much to learn every day and so much to observe and change and improve that I don't think I'll be taking
nothing else.
At least not another viticultural area, another country.
Exactly.
At least not that.
I mean, tell us how you get away from wine, because I know as a kid you dreamed of being a classical guitarist until you suddenly realised that you weren't Julian Bream, right? Few people are. Well, only Julian Bream was Julian Bream.
Well,
but, I mean, do you still play the guitar? How do you get away from wine? Because you've got this very busy life.
I play classical guitar. I have one concert guitar in Mendoza. I have two in Cordoba. I brought one of them into the mountains. I play every day, almost every day. I said I play 5 days a week at least, and at least 2 hours, maybe 4 hours a day, the days I'm lucky.
Wow.
Wow. One of the parts of not being talented is you need to practice a lot. You need to make up the lack of talent with practice.
I think even people with talent practice, don't they?
They do. I don't know who it was, but one famous guitarist, I think it was Segovia, said, if I don't practice one day, I notice, he said. If I don't practice 2 days, the music critics notice. And if I don't practice 3 days, even the public will notice.
That's a fantastic story on which to end. Well, next time I see you, which is going to be very soon in Argentina, I hope you'll play the guitar for me.
Let's do that. Instead of climbing rocks in a weird vineyard, huh?
Let's do it. Okay, listen, it's been fascinating talking to you. Thank you for sharing your story with us. I hope everybody's born with a bit of background noise, but we explained why that was at the beginning. I'll see you very soon. See you soon in Argentina.
Yes, I apologize again from the poor connectivity and the background noise, and it's been a pleasure to talking to you and to the audience.
I'll see you soon. Bye, Santiago.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.
Bye. Take care.
Fascinating interview with one of the legends of the Argentinian wine industry. My apologies for some of the background noise. Next week on Cork Talk, my guest is Mathieu Chardonnier from Top Bordeaux Négociants CVBG. Join me then.
Thanks for listening to Cork Talk. If If you want to read more reports, articles and tasting notes by me, go to my website, timatkin.com. You can also follow me on Twitter @timatkin and on Instagram @timatkinmw. See you next week.